All right. So really quickly, I wanted to talk about how do you render to Mplay? Because I know that in LOPs, we're a lot of times doing things like we're taking screenshots out of LOPs because we don't know how to, save an image out of the viewport. So the first thing that we can do is if we have an object, for example, here's my scene and I'm doing a bunch of stuff and uh, I'll walk you through this. What we have is we have a pipeline specific node that is loading in my objects and attaching my look dev. So this is specific to our workflow, but then I'm adding a bunch of render variables. In this case, you see that I have $OS in the source name and $OS in the name. And it's a prim var. Because these are pulling variables off of the geometry. In this case, there's an attribute on the geometry called debris. And so this allows me to pull attributes right off, which this is really cool. Normally you have to put these into the shader, which is, I actually really like this. Instead of having like hard coding in the shader, what attributes I want to pull off and write to an AOV. So these are how you write your AOVs. So I just use $OS in both of these because it makes it easy for myself. Because now, and you see there's $OS there as well. That's the primitive path of where it's going to go. And then I'm just naming the node. $OS says, give me the node name. So then I can just slam a bunch of these down. So I have debris, sediment, water, mask, occlusion, slope, noise, dirt, UV, and then in this case I'm actually defining the color, the default color for Houdini, which is C, and so I'm defining that one so that way it renders properly. And then UVs, I think I'm just same thing, just pulling that all right off, which is really cool. Then you need a render product node, and this is all pretty much default. You can use this to set a camera. You can do all kinds of things. This gets overridden later by the render ROP if you want to. And you can see here that I'm pulling in this render products vars star. Okay, and so when we look at this, we see render products vars $OS, and we'll see down here in our scene graph, it creates render product vars, and then these are all those different AOVs that I generated. And so by putting that in here, render, I'm just giving it the path to this, and then a star, so it's going to capture all of these AOVs and pull them in. I have two branches here because this one feeds into a turntable node, which is a custom turntable that we have for our workflow. So it does a bunch of stuff for us. So we're going to ignore that. That's why over here I have this C color. This is a weird thing to me. Normally Houdini has a default beauty that comes under C, but in LOPs it doesn't seem to do that for you. So we create this. And then one of the other things that we've also done to make it so it works, and this one instead of being primvar should be raw. The other thing you can do is you can use LPEs. This I find actually is the easiest way. Raw, there's like a certain name that has to go in here for that to work. And then LPEs, if you look at Houdini, Solaris, LPE, you'll find the things that you're supposed to put in here. I believe this is C.star, is to give you the beauty color. And so we'll actually just do that here now. Don't know why I did that. So there we go. Now this will come in properly. The way I had it before wasn't going to work. So because C is not a primvar, right? This is a point or a primitive or a vertex attribute that exists on your geometry. Raw is really just like a wrapper around these LPEs is what it seems to me. And then intrinsics are other attributes that we can pull in, but I wouldn't worry about these. So LPE is my favorite way to define what I want my AOVs to be if you're trying to look at different things. So in this case, I'm merging in a sublayer node, and all that sublayer node is doing is pulling in a bunch of cameras that we have for our different shots. So those shots are written out. I merge those together. I'm throwing a light on here. So this is a directional light, a distant light, so to be like a sun. And then you'll see I have my render settings. So you want to create a render settings. Your render settings allow you to apply your camera, your resolution, And then here you need to put your render product, right, which is this guy. So your render product is defining what render vars you want to pull in, and then your render settings say, I want that render product, because you could have a whole bunch of these stacked and then decide which ones you want to use per render setup. So it's kind of cool that way. So this gives us a render product that we can pull in. We set our camera. And then last thing is we need this USD Render ROP. And you'll see on the USD Render ROP, we tell it what render settings we want to use. Again, you could have multiple render settings for different things. So you could set up a whole bunch of different render settings depending on what you want, and then just switch based on the render, which is, again, pretty cool. It's a lot like the way the ROP works, is that you could have a whole bunch of different ROPs that do different things. It's the same idea. And then we give it where we want it to go. This is all fairly standard. You can set, your frame range if you want. I don't really worry about any of this other stuff. This is all what it needs to be. This little pre-script here is just for us. We, for the way our system works, we actually have to set some variables render time to make that work on the farm, but you guys shouldn't have that problem. Now, rendering, if you say render to disk, it's going to write to disk. It's never going to come up. If you say render to Mplay, it'll render to an Mplay window. Now, be aware, when it renders to Mplay, it's just writing that to active memory. So if you close the Mplay window, it's gone. I think it's probably better, unless you're wanting to see it in, the bucket fill up, to render to disk. Now, speaking of that, with Arnold and LOPs, render to Mplay, the Mplay window will stay black forever. And then at the last second, when it's about to finish, all of a sudden, all the buckets will populate. It does not progressively render to Mplay the way I would expect. It's supposed to allow you to. If you come to Arnold and they enable progressive render, this is supposed to allow you to have progressive rendering in Mplay. I have seen it work. It's inconsistent. I can't figure out what the secret sauce is to make that work all the time, so I don't expect it to. What I tend to do is render to disk, version up my file, work on something else, open up another file. If you do render to disk in the background, it'll save your file, and the render will be going, and you can still control the file because it makes like a snapshot of it, and I believe and renders it off of disk instead of out of your active window. So those are the kind of the different ways that you can render. Now, if you want to use your render viewport, which I hate this in 18.5. The render viewport is so buggy, especially coupled with Arnold. It has been pretty horrible. But if you do, you can click this little film canister icon here, right? And it'll bring up this, this little memory window, and then you can drop down some snapshots. So, we could click this, and there's a snapshot of it, and then we can right-click on that, and we can view that image. It should open up in Mplay, and then once you're in Mplay, you should be able to set that to disk. There may be a preference of like where this is writing. Oh, it tells you right there. There's the database of your render gallery. So tell me where it's putting my render gallery. As to like these, I don't ever use this. So as to like where these would go on disk, I have no idea. But there's some cool tools in there. It looks like if you want to play around. Not my typical workflow. I come from kind of old school lighting where we didn't even have interactive rendering. We just sent everything to a farm. We didn't even look at it. We would just set things based on kind of our intuition, I guess. We would wedge things. So you would set, like, I think this is my minimum change I need to make, and this is my maximum change I need to make. And we'd send two versions to the farm and then kind of look at how far we need to go one way or the other, and then make an adjustment and render again. So we did a lot of our lighting adjustment also in compositing, so that way we didn't have to deal with re-rendering 3D. So we wrote out a ton of AOVs. Every light, every component was all broken out into its own controlling layer, so we could have total control in compositing. It was a pretty fantastic way to light, if you ask me. So a little old school, but old school is still good school. So all right, I hope this helps. Let me know if there's anything else that you guys have questions on that I can help you with.